55 tons of metal and hydraulics moving through dense forest. Watch this. The machine's arm extends, grabs a tree 40 centimeters thick, and gone, severed in seconds. Laid neatly in a stack. The kind of work that would take a 5-man crew an entire hour. Now rewind 70 years. The 1950s. Men with hand saws and axes. Horses dragging logs through mud. 2 cords of timber per day, if you were lucky. If you didn't get crushed. If the tree didn't kick back and kill you on the spot. Logging wasn't just dangerous work. It was a death sentence you clocked into every morning. But then something changed. Early 1950s, somewhere in North America, an engineer looked at a draught excavator and thought, what if we put a cutting head on this thing? What if we stopped sending men under falling trees? The first mechanized feller buncher rolled out, crude, slow by today's standards. But it was the beginning of a revolution that would transform the deadliest profession in America into something almost unrecognizable. Here's the question that should be burning in your mind right now. How did a machine built from excavator parts in the 50s evolve into a 55-ton technological monster worth $500,000? How did steel and hydraulics save thousands of lives while turning logging into an industrial machine? That's the story we're about to tell. Let's go back to 1954. The chainsaw arrives on the scene. Think about that for a second. Before 1954, loggers were still using hand saws. 2-man crosscut saws that took minutes to fell a single tree. The chainsaw changed everything overnight. Productivity doubled, from 2 cords per day to 4. Suddenly, 1 man could do the work of 2. But he was still standing next to a falling tree. Still exposed, still vulnerable. The industry had tasted mechanization, and there was no going back. Enter the 1960s. The wheeled skidder. Picture a 4-wheeled tractor with a massive grapple arm on the back. This thing could drag 12 full-size trees at once through any weather, any terrain. Rain, snow, mud, didn't matter. The skidder just pulled. But here's the problem. It still required a 5-man crew, 2 fallers with chainsaws cutting trees. 1 skidder operator dragging logs. 2 buckers cutting them to length. 5 men. 5 paychecks. 5 lives at risk. The industry looked at this setup and asked a simple question. What if we could combine all these jobs into one machine? The 1970s answered. The feller buncher emerged as its own class of equipment. Not just a modified excavator anymore, a purpose-built forest harvesting machine. Safer, faster, more productive. Companies like Bark and Bell Equipment started competing to build the best one. Then, Tiger Cat entered the arena, John Deere, Caterpillar. The race was on, but what these companies didn't fully understand yet was that they weren't just building machines. They were building the solution to America's deadliest workplace. And the problem they were solving, it was worse than anyone wanted to admit. Here's a number that should stop you cold. 109.5 deaths per 100,000 workers. That's logging in America, the most dangerous profession in the country. 27 times deadlier than the average job. Not twice as dangerous. Not 5 times. 27 times. Let's talk about how loggers actually died. Falling trees. The most obvious killer. A 60-foot pine doesn't care about your experience or your reflexes. When it comes down wrong, you have maybe a second to react. Most don't make it. Then there's struck-by incidents. The industry's cold term for getting hit by rolling logs, branches snapping back, equipment swinging around. Your body caught between thousands of pounds of wood and gravity, and limbs, arms and legs getting caught in machinery, crushed between logs, mangled in saw chains. This was the reality every single day before mechanization. Let me tell you about what happened in British Columbia, late 1990s. A feller buncher operator, experienced guy, 15 years in the industry, working a steep slope when his machine started to tip. 50 tons of steel rolling sideways. In the old days, a logger in that situation would have been crushed instantly, no question. But this operator, he stayed in the cab. The rollover protection system did exactly what it was designed to do. The machine tumbled. Glass shattered. Metal screamed. When it stopped, he walked out with a broken rib and a concussion. He went home to his family that night. His grandfather, who logged the same forests in the 1950s with a handsaw, never would have survived that. Now watch what happens when you put a man inside a steel cage with hydraulic arms doing the cutting for him. The feller buncher didn't just make logging faster, it pulled workers out of the kill zone. The operator sits protected while the machine does the dying work. Struck by incidents, plummeted. Falling tree deaths, nearly eliminated for equipment operators. The revolution worked. But here's where it gets interesting and darker. New dangers emerged. 19% of injuries now happen during maintenance and repair. Mechanics crawling under 50-ton machines, hydraulic lines bursting. Another 9% during assembly and disassembly of equipment. The machines saved lives, but they created their own risks. And here's the real kicker. 28% of injuries still happen to equipment operators themselves. Human error. The most sophisticated machine in the forest is still controlled by a human making split-second decisions. One wrong move, tipping on a slope, misjudging a tree's lean, hitting a hidden stump, and 55 tons of steel becomes a coffin. But the cruelest irony, the workers still doing limbing by hand, trimming branches the machines couldn't reach. They faced the highest injury rates of all. The technology saved some, but it couldn't save everyone. The question became, how far could steel and hydraulics actually go? The 1980s, Bell Equipment and Morbark joined forces to create something unprecedented. The Moore-Bell, the first three-wheeled feller buncher to hit the American market. A partnership born from necessity. Two companies, one vision. Dominate the logging industry. The partnership didn't last. They split. Competition exploded. Suddenly, Bell and Morbark weren't allies. They were rivals fighting for the same contracts, the same customers, the same future. And that competition, it pushed innovation into overdrive. Then, 1992 arrived, and everything shifted again. TigerCat drops the 726 feller buncher. This machine didn't just enter the market, it created a new standard: power, precision, reliability. John Deere noticed. By 1993, Deere and TigerCat signed an exclusive deal to develop the 853 RB track feller buncher. TigerCat's engineering brilliance combined with Deere's massive dealer network across Canada. The result, market penetration that competitors couldn't touch. But let's talk about what these machines actually became. Modern specs. TigerCat 870C, 308 horsepower of raw hydraulic violence. Caterpillar 563D, 300 horsepower, 49 tons with the harvester head attached. These aren't machines, they're industrial predators. And then came the real game changer, cut-to-length technology. The 1970s gave birth to harvester heads that did the work of 3 separate machines. Watch this process. The head grabs a tree, cuts it at the base, lays it horizontal, strips every branch, measures the trunk, and cuts it to exact specifications, all in one continuous motion. What used to require a faller, a skidder operator, and 2 buckers now happens in seconds with 1 operator. By the late 1980s, the industry introduced forwarders, specialized carriers that gently lift cut logs and transport them without dragging, reducing soil damage and environmental impact. The forest wasn't just being harvested faster, it was being harvested smarter. But size and power only tell part of the story. The real question was whether these machines could handle the impossible, the steep slopes, the extreme terrain, the conditions where even the bravest loggers refused to go. That answer was coming, and it would redefine what extreme logging actually meant. Let's talk about what these machines can actually do. A manual logging crew, 5 experienced men with chainsaws and skidders, can clear a section of forest in days. A single feller buncher, hours. We're not talking about minor improvements. We're talking about a complete demolition of the old productivity ceiling. Break down the cycle time. 60% positioning, 29% cutting, 11% placing the tree in the stack. Every movement calculated, every second optimized. The machine doesn't get tired, doesn't take breaks, doesn't slow down as the day drags on. But here's what that speed costs: $500,000 for a new feller buncher. $500,000 for one machine. And yet, logging companies buy them without hesitation. Why? Because the math works. Fewer workers, faster harvests, higher volumes. The machine pays for itself, then keeps printing money. Now let's get into the engineering that makes this possible. Hydraulic systems generating 1,150 kilograms of lifting capacity. Boom reach extending 10 meters, far enough to grab trees from a safe distance. Feeding force of 14.6 kilonewtons pushing timber through the cutting head. These numbers aren't just specs. They're the difference between a machine that works and a machine that dominates. And here's where Tiger Cat separated itself from the pack: energy-efficient hydraulics. Most manufacturers focused on raw power. Tiger Cat focused on efficiency. Their hydraulic systems burned less fuel while delivering the same, sometimes better, performance. Over decades of operation, this saved thousands of truckloads of diesel. Thousands. That's not an exaggeration. That's documented, calculated savings that turned into pure profit for logging companies. But power means nothing if you can't deploy it safely. Steep slopes, 90-degree inclines where gravity wants to pull 50 tons of steel straight down the mountain. The industry's answer? Tethered systems. Cable-assisted feller bunchers anchored to trees, or fixed points upslope. The machine operates, but it's held in place by steel cables rated for extreme tension. If it starts to tip, the cables catch it. If the ground gives way, the cables hold it. Logging on slopes that would kill a manual crew. Logging in conditions that defy physics. This is what technology unlocked, and the market responded. The U.S. forest equipment market hit $2.18 billion in 2025, projected to reach $3 billion by 2035, a 3.5% compound annual growth rate. Not explosive, but steady. Relentless. Because the demand for timber isn't going anywhere, and the technology keeps improving. But here's the uncomfortable truth lurking beneath all these numbers, all this power, all this innovation. What did we actually gain? And more importantly, what did we lose? Injury rates in logging declined for 7 straight years through the late 1990s. 7 years of fewer broken bodies. Fewer funerals. Fewer families destroyed by a profession that used to grind men into the forest floor. Mechanization worked. The numbers don't lie. But let's look at what actually changed for the workers who survived this transformation. The logger of the 1950s swung an axe, pulled a saw, dragged timber. Brutal, dangerous work, but physical. The modern equipment operator sits in a climate-controlled cab for 10 to 12 hours straight. Minimal movement, maximum repetition, same motions, thousands of times per shift. The machine saved his life from falling trees, but handed him a new set of problems: back pain, joint deterioration, cardiovascular issues from sedentary work. We traded one kind of damage for another, and then there's the environmental story everyone wants to ignore. Feller bunchers and forwarders reduced the need for logging roads cutting through forests. Fewer roads meant less erosion, less soil disruption. Cable systems on steep slopes eliminated the need to drag logs downhill, tearing up vegetation. The machines, ironically, became gentler on the forest than humans ever were. But here's the statistic that should make you question everything you think you know about automation killing jobs. Companies that adopted feller bunchers saw slight increases in total employment. Read that again. Increases. Why? Because a $500,000 machine doesn't maintain itself. You need mechanics, hydraulic specialists, technicians who understand computer diagnostics. The logger with the chainsaw became the technician with the laptop. The job didn't disappear. It evolved. Yet in regions with impossibly steep terrain, mechanization hit its limit. Some slopes are too extreme, even for tethered systems. Manual cutting still happens in these areas, but skyline yarding, cable systems that lift logs through the air instead of dragging them, reduced the exposure. Workers cut the trees, cables do the hauling. Hybrid solutions for impossible conditions. The transformation wasn't universal. It was fragmented, regional, complicated. Some logging operations look like scenes from a science fiction film. Others still look like 1970. The technology spread, but it didn't conquer everything. And that leads us to the final, uncomfortable question. Did we actually solve the problem, or did we just move it somewhere else? Today, machines like the Tiger Cat 180 swing yarder roar through forests with 409 horsepower of controlled fury. John Deere, Caterpillar, Bell, all still locked in the same technological arms race that started decades ago. Each generation of equipment more powerful, more precise, more expensive than the last. The specialization is staggering. Compact 6.5-ton harvesters like the Malwa 560H designed for thinning operations, selective cutting in dense young forests. Then, on the opposite extreme, 55-ton giants built to clear entire hillsides in a single shift. There's a machine for every application, every terrain type, every logging strategy imaginable. And this technology didn't stay in North America. The innovations born in the forests of the United States and Canada now dominate Europe, South Africa, Australia. Anywhere trees grow commercially, these machines followed. The feller buncher went global, carrying with it the promise of safer, faster, more efficient logging. But let's be brutally honest about where we actually stand. Logging is still a dangerous profession. The machines reduced certain deaths dramatically, but transportation, hauling logs on highways and massive trucks, remains the leading cause of fatalities. Men still die, just differently than before. The revolution was real, but it was incomplete. Here's the image I want you to hold in your mind: a 55-ton machine costing $500,000, operated by a single human, sitting in a steel and glass cockpit. That machine makes the impossible possible. It cuts trees safer than any manual crew, faster than any historical method, more efficiently than anyone in the 1950s could have imagined. But inside that cabin, behind all that hydraulic power and computer controls, there's still a person making decisions, a person who can make mistakes, a person whose life depends on the machine working exactly as designed every single time. The feller buncher transformed logging from a death sentence into an industrial process. It saved thousands of lives, changed entire economies, redefined what humans could achieve with steel, hydraulics, and engineering brilliance. But every single day, somewhere in the world, an operator climbs into one of these machines and takes a risk, a smaller risk than his grandfather faced with a handsaw and an axe, but a risk nonetheless. The revolution happened, the industry changed, the machines won. But the danger, it never completely disappeared. It just learned to hide inside the iron.